So I'm heading home today, Wednesday. Got to go to my hometown in Johnstown, New York, which is in the foothills of the Adirondacks, the lower part of the Adirondack Park. Coming from where I live in Deer Park, New York, which is Orange County, which is nestled between the Catskills and the Poconos, and it's just a few miles north of the Delaware River. Normally I take the thruway, but this time for this video I'm going to take the Catskills route, which is a little bit longer, obviously, which you're going to go through the back country roads. And I got a couple of specific spots that I'm going to check out. The Buttermilk Falls Brook, otherwise known as Creek, Buttermilk Falls Creek. Yeah, brook, creek. That's how we say it in the country. But anyway, the trip is going to bring me through a much denser set of mountains than the Poconos, because again I got sidetracked on the Poconos trip, but this trip I know this trip well, even though there's it's not the main. I usually go 17 to 30 and take 30 all the way up, but this time I'm going up to it is I forget the name of the Papadopoulos. Oh yeah, Napanock, New York, which is a little bit north of Evansville, and this is on 209. 209 is the road coming from my house that goes directly to the thruway, which is another route I take sometimes. So at Napanock, I'll go into the mountains from there, and then I'll follow the GPS and do what I did in the Poconos, which is just once I get to that first destination, I'll hit a spot on the map and then let the map dictate the directions, and then follow that and then see where it takes me. Living here reminds me of home. I grew up in the Adirondacks, just a couple hours north. So this is like being home. The small town of Port Jervis, 4 miles south of my house, is the same size and population as Johnstown, New York, where I grew up, with a similar background. Both once thriving economies, now a shell of what they used to be, thanks to outsourcing and bad trade deals. I live in a little hamlet in the town of Deer Park. I carved out 3 acres that I call home. And for now, this is life. I lived in Brooklyn for 6 years before moving to Orange County. I was focused on my training and my goals, leaving little time for myself. Something I needed to do at the time, I guess. So I just made it through Ellensville, not Evansville, Ellensville, and made the turn off of 209 to 55, which will cut right through the mountain and eventually take me to the falls area there where I want to go. But right now I'm going through some pretty cool road. I want to get some footage of that road, which looks cool. So I'll talk again at the falls. All work and no play can lead to a boring, less than enthusiastic outlook on life. Taking the time to appreciate nature, breathing the fresh air, and enjoying what God has created can be life-changing. In New York City, breathing fresh air is accompanied with the harsh smell of someone who just relieved themselves on the sidewalk. And the closest thing to Mother Nature is walking to the subway in a rainstorm. So I made the turn off of 55 to 55A, and this is the Roundout Reservoir. Take a walk down this path, down to the shore. This is interesting. Nice. See, again, this is similar to how some of the lakes in the Adirondacks, where you just randomly find spots on these lakes for little swimming access. But yeah, I would jump in here. Actually carry the kayak here and launch here. Nice. Now you see, this is New York. Too many people outside of New York don't realize how big and beautiful New York State is. And the fact that when you take away New York City and some of the larger metropolitan areas, it's quite conservative, even though they consider it a blue state. But that's the same as California as well. So out here in the country, folks are conservative. But so yeah, so let's round out Reservoir. The purpose and history of certain locations fascinate me in my later years. Round Out Reservoir is part of New York City's water supply network. It's located 75 miles northwest of the city in the Catskill Mountains, near the southern end of Catskill Park, split between the towns of Wawarsing in Ulster County and Neversink in Sullivan County. It is the central collection point for the city's Delaware system, which provides half its daily consumption. I've kayaked some of the lakes and reservoirs in this area. Like the Great Sacandaga Reservoir where I grew up, building this man-made body of water led to the loss of some small towns that were unfortunately in the way of man's progress. Construction began in 1937 and ended in 1954. 3 villages, Lackawack, Montella, and Eureka, are now forever part of history, absorbed into this beautiful scenery. The Peekamoose Blue Hole is located in Sundown Wild Forest, set within the secluded wilderness of the Catskill Forest Preserve. The Blue Hole is a depression in the steamed rock on the Roundout Creek, a unique natural feature formed by sand and swirling gravel in an ancient whirlpool. The creek is part of the New York City drinking water watershed. Over the last few years, the wilderness experience has been affected by the presence of large crowds on summer weekends. I didn't locate the actual blue hole as seen in this picture, but with more time, one day I'll come back to check it out. This is Peekamoose, right? The Peekamoose Valley. There's the falls are up a ways, but there's quite a few pull-off spots where you can get to the brook, otherwise known as the creek. So this is an area where people can camp, also picnic, and I read some blogs online referencing this area, and where lately there's been a lot of people coming here in the summertime and perhaps creating problems. People who grew up here, we know we really want to take care of these areas, respect, carry in, carry out type of thing. Oh, okay. So here's a spot where I can't access the brook that well, but there's one pull off. So here's an area designated for camping. Actually, it looks really cool. Really cool spot, but I'm sure if I walk down that way I'll find a spot to access the brook, but I'll just go back to the truck and drive up a little ways. Well, at least here there's more snow than where I'm at. Just a little further north. Plus we got a nice little Mother Nature show with some snow coming down on this trip. So this will be interesting once I put this video together. Back in the Big Blue. Once I found the falls, I'm not sure that this was the actual Buttermilk Falls. The signs did not indicate this. This image is the actual falls based on a Google search. So in order to locate Buttermilk Falls, I'm sure it's a bit of a hike that I missed. According to Google Maps, this spot is officially called Buttermilk Falls Brook. As you can see, the falls are a bit upstream from where I parked. It will require a second trip to find the actual Buttermilk Falls. The Buttermilk Falls Brook still offered a great photo op. I'm certainly not disappointed. Add to that the wintry effect, and the experience was very satisfying. So here, another pull-off spot, and it's right by the falls. I saw them falls from the road, so check this out. Yeah. Beautiful. That's great. There's even, looks like a kind of a trail that comes up that way, but nice. I suppose on video you really can't appreciate the depth of this, but this is incredible. It's awesome. Even though I grew up only a couple hours north of the Catskills, I never really explored them. We always went north into the Adirondacks. The actual origins of the name Catskills is a mystery. When the Dutch arrived in the 17th century, mountain lions were known to be in the area. Of course, the legend of Henry Hudson's ghost and the lengthy slumber of Rip Van Winkle have endured for nearly 2 centuries as part of the Catskills lore. Today, we call that fake news. My next stop, the little town of Phoenicia, New York. The Ulster and Delaware Railroad arrived at this community first, which is now part of the Catskill Mountain Railroad's tourist operations. Phoenicia is on the other side of the mountain from Woodstock, New York. You may or may not find some throwback hippies trying to relive the glory days here, but every August you can enjoy Phoenicia International Festival of the Voice, which includes a variety of musical performances, including opera, gospel music, world music, and musical theater. So I was on 28, eventually heading to 30, but I decided to take another side road, which this will cut through the mountain and eventually get to 30, but this is definitely a much more interesting route. And then behind me I see this big, huge Great Dane saying hello to me. And there's a railroad museum back that way, but I'm just going to take the ride. I'm going to cut through the mountain. Traveling along the countryside like this, without the pressure and hustle and bustle of reality, I can almost picture myself living the nomadic life. Not a care in the world, save for the need to hunt and gather in order to survive. Grocery stores killed that fantasy. Now survival is a toss-up between keto, gluten-free, or a big fat cheeseburger. I often wonder how my life would have been had I been born in 1865 instead of 1965. Society was different, so perhaps social anxieties were not as prevalent back then. When society grew and developed cultural standards separating us into groups, we began to question which group we belonged to. More like others questioned which group we belonged to and judged us accordingly. Yes, I know I can be a bit overzealous with my philosophical rants. Spoiler alert, I'm about to get all kind of political on you while driving. But anyway, I guess the point of this type of blog is to inspire people to get off the main highway, take the beaten path, the unbeaten path, I should say. You know, plan your trip an hour or two earlier, and go off the main road. Like if you're going to take the thruway, for instance, take these back roads, take the scenic view, and take your time, and appreciate this nation and the freedom that we have. Again, America is incredible, and I've seen a lot of these blogs out west, and I'm intrigued by the desert and all that, simply because I grew up here in the green mountains, and so the desert is really interesting to me. And eventually you will see what happens with this channel. This is just sort of like an experiment. I'm getting ready to start my news vlog, which is news, opinion, and commentary, called the Crankcast. I've been ready, but I've had some issues, technical issues with the streaming software, in compatibility with the camera. So I had some glitches that I had to figure out, and I finally had that figured out. I did some test videos, so now I'm ready to give it a shot. As I'm no longer interested in doing the mainstream style that I was doing in the past 2 years, and especially under sort of that corporate umbrella. Even though the companies I worked for the past 2 years claim not to be corporate, they still have that same ideology where essentially you have to fit their agenda. So as a journalist, I really didn't have 100% autonomy, I guess. No, not autonomy. I guess independence, or the freedom to say exactly what I choose to say. And for the most part, as a professional, I suppose you have to fit within the model of that company, within the business model of that company. So as a professional working for someone else, I suppose that's what I had to do. But it still doesn't sit well in today's environment. The most important thing is to educate everybody, including myself, as I learn and as I develop and as I grow in this business of information dissemination. The truth is the only thing that matters, not convenient truth, not truth based on which side of the aisle you're on, but the actual truth. And it's amazing what I've discovered over the past 2 years. Even though for years before that I was pretty much a newsaholic, but I didn't really go as in-depth as I have over the past, especially the past year. The year before that with the other company, they weren't doing strictly politics, but the last company I was with was strictly politics and strictly Trump, which was okay because their demographic was all Trump supporters. But it's also important to still hold this president's feet to the fire. And a lot of what's been happening is that people haven't been able to hold this president's feet to the fire simply because the outrage against him is so strong that they're not that they're afraid, but they they feel so sorry for the guy, and they're so loyal to him because he has truly accomplished so much against so many incredible odds. It's insane. So you can't help but want to side with someone like that, the massive underdog. Now, in some cases that could be dangerous, especially if there was honest to God ill intent, which under the circumstances, especially when you've studied him and you see the moves that President Trump has made in terms of going the opposite direction of what your traditional tyrannical move would be, or your Hitlerian move would be. He is increasing American freedoms, not decreasing, which is what's been going on under the liberal agenda for many years, including the neocon Republicans when they were in power. They were establishing incredible regulations that were choking, opportunities for Americans, taking them away, as a matter of fact, turning once prosperous areas into dens of alcoholism and drug abuse because there's no opportunity there anymore. So now, within 3 years, almost 4 years, he's completely turned that around. So it's important to understand the truth of everything, so that the balance comes back to the population, to us, to me and you, because we don't have that balance right now. It's extreme hate on one side or the other, and we need to stop it because it's not healthy. Because even if it doesn't happen with President Trump, the next one that comes in office that may have ill intent will take advantage of that and play upon those emotions. Pretend that that he or she is doing the right thing, but setting up for the kill, so to speak. So anyway, I should be on 30 any minute now, and then once I'm on 30A, it's a straight shot back home. My original training in media was broadcast journalism back in the early 90s. I hated the idea of news back then. I was a free spirit with some serious attention issues. I had a hard time figuring out who I was, let alone what my contribution to society would be. Sadly, both still kind of apply. But I digress. So I made it to 30. And now it's just a beeline home. I say home, it's my home where I grew up, Johnstown. So this is Grand Gorge. From here I will head home. I got a lunch date with my son Zachariah, and then I got some work to do in my mom's attic. I got to clean out all my stuff that I have stored there and bring it home and sort through it. I got a bunch of paperwork I'm looking for. So that essentially was the ultimate goal today, and sidetracking through the mountains was the diversion, the relaxing diversion. This was a relaxing trip, and I kind of feel guilty for enjoying it. Being a workaholic can poison the mind and take nature out of your thinking. Maybe if I market this channel, I can do this for a living. But what then? Will I grow to be tired of this? Will nature become a burden? I doubt it. Nature is tied to our soul, like faith. We all need it. It's just that sometimes we don't know that we need it. We take faith in nature for granted until we want something from it. Now, I know my faith and my love of nature are stronger than ever, because my life was almost lost without them. So maybe it's good to take something for granted briefly in order to truly appreciate it again with a new outlook. So I made it, not in Johnstown yet, but I'm in Gloversville, one town away, well, close to it. Yeah, so what is normally 2.5 to 3 hour trip from my house to where I grew up ended up being 6 hours because of the diversions I took, which was well worth it. And so it was kind of a cool trip. So I guess I can close it here. The trip back home, I'm gonna take the thruway. Boring, as boring can be. So thanks for hanging out with me on this trip, and we'll see you next time.